Welcome back to Let's Automate It with Robin, AI and automation for non-techies. And today I want to dive into the magical HTTP node. What is the HTTP node? It is the Swiss Army knife. It is the node that lets us do actions, access tools, perform functions that maybe aren't native to n8n. So this is what we're going to look at today. We're going to see if we can use the HTTP node to access any API. We're going to see if we can use it to scrape a website. And we're also going to use it to be able to send data to another source. So we're going to work through this live, do this build, unpack, and look at the HTTP node from a non-techie perspective. So if we look at n8n and we click into n8n, we have lots of actions, lots of pre-built integrations to existing softwares out here. This list just goes on, and every single one of these items you see on this list are really native connections that someone within the n8n community or on the n8n team has built a pre-existing, pre-configured connection to the software in particular. For example, there's a connection to Dropbox. But really all these are pre-configured HTTP nodes that let us talk to Freshdesk, that let us talk to GitHub, to Gmail, and so on. But it's often going to happen where there is just not a native connection for you to connect to. There isn't one, it hasn't been built. But that's not a problem, because if these are just basic HTTP nodes that have been pre-configured and given an icon and a title, why can't we use a raw HTTP node and configure our own node? So here's the HTTP node. Let's go. I wonder how many times in this video I'm going to say HTTP wrong. Let's count. So far, I think the count is 2. So here's the node. I've just dragged it on here, and let's have a quick look at it here. So we're going to just click into it. So HTTP request. What is this? Well, really, what this node is going to do is I like to think of it in non-technical terms. I like to think of this as a node that kind of heads over to an address somewhere on the internet. That destination, the address we would put here in the URL bar. It's kind of like a door. We head over to a house, there's a front door on there, and we go and knock on the door. How do we find the door? Well, we find the door by knowing what the address is, what the URL is here. When we get to that door, we want to open it, but we've got to have the key. There's a special key, and the key is authentication. It's the password, it's the lock, whatever you want to call it, but it is the mechanism with which we can unlock that door. And when we unlock that door, behind that door is going to be all kinds of basically databases or servers. And we can do things with these servers. We can delete records, get records. We can, the most common ones here that we use are going to be post and get. Patches, we can update a record, we can insert a new record, etc., etc. These are some of the activities, some of the actions we can take. So when we find this door, pull out our key, we unlock the door, we get inside, and then we can do things. And that's really what's going on here with this HTTP request. So we can send a set of instructions as well. Let's think about it. Let's say we were sending a courier over. We wanted to send a courier there. We needed to give the courier a set of instructions. So they had the key, they could open the door, and then they would need to ask questions of the information inside there. They need to talk to the person, the metaphorical person in this example, and say, hey, I need this information and that kind of information. So some of the query parameters. We can send body. A body might be information that the courier's carried with it that it wants to hand over to the person on the other side of the door. I think I need to bring this door analogy to an end now, but essentially what we're doing here is, knocking on the door, opening the door, and then performing some actions inside there. Now, the door is software. It is another service. It's somewhere that we want to either get information from or send information into. Principally, that's most of what it can do. But this tool is really, really flexible, and we can do a hang of a lot with it. So if you find yourself needing access to some information source, or be able to update some information source, and it's not listed in here, it does not matter. You can get the job done with your HTTP node. So let's build an example there. Let's dive right in. So as I've said, we can access any API. Now, the one API I love to access, but weirdly, n8n does not have access to, is Perplexity. Perplexity being the search engine AI, an AI that acts like a search engine and can, find results and citations and apply a level of artificial intelligence to it. Very, very useful. But we do not have a Perplexity. Yeah, just don't have a Perplexity node. So let's go and figure out together how we can get an HTTP request to access Perplexity for us. All right. So the first thing we need to do is head over to Perplexity. So I've gone over to perplexity.ai and I've logged in. I've got an account already. Set it up. I'm hitting this little cog icon here. And here's API. All right, and I've got a couple of credits here, and here is my API key. Okay, so this is the key that's going to unlock that front door, but that's really not going to help us because we don't know where the front door is, and we don't quite know how to go about unlocking it, but at least we've got the key. All right, so let's park that for a moment. So now we need to go and find the API documentation. So let's just do a little search here for Perplexity. I'm sure I could navigate to it, but I just like to do a little Google search. Just Google Perplexity API docs. I'm sure that's going to give us something. Here we go. Explore the docs. All right. So I'm clicking into Perplexity Home here, and there we have API reference key. So what am I doing here? I'm trying to get the information I need so that I can go configure that HTTP node. So we need to be able to get our authorization. This is the key. This is the mechanism that we're going to use to unlock. So what do we need here? So I'm looking at this information and I'm going, the bearer authentication header of the from bearer where token is your, okay. So I think the token is the API key. We've seen where we can get that from. And it looks like I need to have the word bearer space authorization, bearer space token key. And I'm looking over to the left here. Now, I'm not techie, so I am kind of reading this with layman eyes. So if I can do it, you can do it. Okay, so here we have our authorization. It looks like there's authorization, bearer token. That's what we need to have in here. So that looks like what we're after. So let's go and set that up. I'm going to just copy this whole thing up here, and I'm going to stop just short of that token key here. So I'm just copying that text. Coming back over to my node here. And now I'm going into my authentication. Now, what did it say here? Let's go back here. It says authentication header, bearer authentication header. So I want to send a header over. So I'm going to turn on send headers. And I'm going to add in here. Actually, I think what it looks like I've got to put in here is this word authorization. So let's do that. So I put that word authorization here. It looks like I forgot to copy the O. And now we are wanting this bearer token. So I'm going to include the little space that's after bearer. And I'm going to put that in there. And then I'm going to come back and try and get hold of that API key I had before. Where was it hiding? There it is. So I'm going to copy that API key, come back here and pop that in there. Okay. So we're going to find out if that's going to work in a moment. So now we have what we think is our key. We hope this is going to be the key, okay? But we're not done yet because we need to know where to go and use this key. What is the URL we want to get to? So let's head back over to our docs here and have a look at what this wants. Okay, so first of all, it's telling us it must be a post request. So we're ultimately here, we're doing a chat completion. We're going to be talking to this AI. So that's where we're at right now. There are other things we can do with this AI, but let's just say we're going to talk for it at the moment. So that means it needs to be a post request. So read with me here. I'm non-techie, so I'm kind of figuring this out as we go, but I am recognizing over here that I've got the option to post. All right, so it's a post method. And I need /chat completions. Now, obviously, there needs to be something in the website address before that. So let me come over here where we've got this curl request. It's giving more information. So I'm going to copy all of that, and I can see it finishes in AI chat completions. Amazing. So I'm going to pop that in there. And that looks like a proper URL to me. So that's where we're going to go. We're going to knock on the door and we're going to try and unlock the door with this authorization. So I don't know. Let's see what's going to happen. I'm going to press test setup now and let's see what happens. Bad request. I need some information. You need, what's it saying here? looks like I need some fields in the body. So I don't know if that's worked yet, but let's just go back to this, and we need some body fields. So what are we? Body. The name of the model to be completed. Let's come over to this side. I like what I'm seeing over here. So we need content type application JSON. So it looks like we need another header type in here. So I don't think we want that semicolon. So let's come back and let's add another parameter. We're going to go content type, and we're going to go application JSON as the value. Why am I doing that? Not entirely sure. I'm just following along here. So this now looks like JSON to me. So we want to put this JSON into our system. So let me just got something called data there. So data is probably going to be the body we're going to send over. And we're probably going to send over as JSON. We're sending a body as JSON. And here I'm seeing the JSON. So we wouldn't include that little speech mark there. Take that out. So that to me looks like JSON. So let's come back here. And we've set JSON. And this is just going to give us the JSON field. I'm just going to paste that in here. Okay, let's make that an expression. Let's expand this out and so we can read it. So the model we're going to be pinging is Sonar. That's the model it's using. And how many stars, max token. Okay, we've got some sample data now, probably enough to test if this is going to be working. So we're going to our URL. We're going to play a post. We've got our key, and the content type we're sending is application JSON. Let's see if this works. Let's hit this button. Frequency filter. So I got an error. Validation. Frequency filter must be down. Oh, yeah, okay, so let's go back in here and have a look at what have I got here. Frequency filter. Oh, right. Look, we've got a little string here. It's expecting a value. If you can look here, it's expecting a value. We've got this little. So I'm just going to, I don't know what I want there. So I'm just going to delete that out. Leave it there in case I need it for future. And let's test step again. And there we go. It worked. We've just created, you've literally created with me live an API access into Perplexity. So we sent a message over. Let's look at this in table format. It's told us how many tokens we used, et cetera, citations. What was the question we actually sent? I'm not even sure. What did we read here? Let's have a look here. What is the question? How many stars are there in our galaxy? And it's come back saying the Milky Way galaxy, which is our home, is estimated, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it's working. We've got ourselves, why don't we go ahead and rename this? Let's just give this a new name and call this Perplexity. Yeah, there we go. That's good. We renamed it. So we now have a node that's accessing Perplexity. So what we could do to make this kind of useful to us is we may have a webhook or I'm going to grab a set node here just to build this up. We may have and I'm just going to connect it in front. Let's say, let's think of it. Maybe we've got like a webhook coming in where there's a web form somewhere else, and someone's filling out the webhook, and then that webhook's bringing information in, and we're capturing this information into a set field, then we're going to pass it into here. So let's just have a quick look at what information it wanted. Let's just, for the sake of expediency on this video, let's just change the question. So let's just have a question field here. So I'm just going to go into this, and let's just call this question. Now we could map any question into this. So I'm going to ask it to, what is the population of Cape Town? My hometown. All right. So obviously I'm hard coding this in. This would be a dynamic field that you would bring in. Let's test that step. Great. So now we're passing data to this. Let's open this up, and let's go into here. Here we've got this question. So I'm just going to delete this out. Now, what I'm doing here, you could repeat everywhere. You could absolutely repeat. So I've just pulled in that question, and you could change your system prompt. You could change your tokens, et cetera, all the information you've got there. But here it is. Let's go test step. And it's trying to figure out what is the population of Cape Town. Now, Perplexity is actually going and searching the web to get this information. It's not looking at its own database. And there we have about 5 million people live in here, but it estimates to be much bigger. Fantastic. So there we have it, guys. This is a practical use where you can now use an HTTP node. Very simply, we just kind of went over and had a look at the docs, and we kind of figured our way through the docs here of what's going on. We had to figure out our key. We had to figure out that we needed this other little piece in here, and then we dropped our JSON on to get it working. Now, each integration you do, each software you attach, they're going to have API docs, and they're going to have something along these lines. You're going to have to just kind of read those docs to figure out exactly what they want. But whatever they want, you'll be able to configure it here inside of your HTTP node, and you're going to be able to unlock access to that. So this is the amazing benefit of the HTTP node. Lets us access pretty much any API that is available to us to be able to go and get data. So that's working really nicely. Okay, I do want to show you a little trick though. I do want to show you a little trick that I think is often missed. So if we come in here, you can see here here's our key, our authorization token, and our key. Now, if I'm going to share the JSON of this, and you can just simply share the JSON by, copying this and sending to someone else. If I do that, it's going to expose my actual API key for the whole world to see. So maybe I don't want to do that. And also, when I go and create a brand new workflow and I want to reuse this node, I could cut and paste it. But I'm going to have to rebuild this node. It'd be a lot simpler if I had a credential that I could just use over and over and over again. I want to kind of have a look at how we can do that. Okay, so let's jump in here. And here we've got this section called authentication. Although it's labeled none, we are using authentication, but we're just using it here under the parameters. We're using these header parameters to do that. But we don't have to do that. So if we click into here, we can use a generic credential type. And this credential type we're using here, it's a header. We're sending it in the header. So this is a header auth credential. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go to generic, and I'm going to go to header auth type. Okay. And I'm going to load a brand new credential in here. So I'm actually I know what it's going to ask me. So I'm just going to copy this whole credential. What have I copied? I've copied my API key and then this bearer space in front of it. So I'm going to create a brand new key here. And actually, that was editing an old one. So let's go create a new credential. So the value is going to be what I've just cut and paste. And I'm going to go over here because the header we want is authorization. All right, now I can rename this. And let's just call this perp tut. Okay, so that's now the name of our credential. So I've saved that, close out of that. So now what we can actually do, I believe, if this is going to work, I don't need this anymore. So I can get rid of that. I think I will probably still need that though. And now here, originally we were sitting on, I think it was none. Where is it? Where were we sitting? Credential, none. That's what we had beforehand. But now I've gone and created that credential. So let's go. All right, I've got the credential. Let me go find it. It's a generic credential. Here's it's a header auth, and here's all the header auths I've got going. So there's the perp tut one. So now we've got that credential loaded. We can use it elsewhere. And if we share this workflow, it's not going to expose our API key. But let's see if this works. Let's do exactly the same thing. And we get a result. So there's a little trick where you can go and create your credentials. So here we're creating a header auth, but you can do basic auth, OAuth 2, OAuth 3. So even if, just like the HTTP node is useful for accessing an API, if we don't have a pre-built credential, a predefined credential from n8n, we can still create a generic credential, save it, and reuse it over and over again. So that's pretty cool. So here we have a working setup. So we've looked at how to access Perplexity, we've looked at credentials, and I can't believe it took me so long to figure this out. I figured this out a while ago, but there's a little hack called a curl import. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what curl is, but what I do recognize, though, is that this is curl. Look at this. It says curl, and it's got a little copy button over here. So I'm going to go and copy this. Now, often when I look at API docs for all kinds of things, I often see in the documentation, there is this little curl option. And you can just go and copy curl, and look at this. you come back over to your node here. You go and grab an HTTP node. And if you notice, it's got this import curl button right there. So go click onto that, delete out anything if there's anything in there, paste that in, import it. And what it's done is pre-configured the entire, let me just get out, it's connected to here automatically, so let's put some data in. Let me just go back here. It's pre-configured this entire node with everything that we need. And I've actually, if I look here, I've got my header parameters. If I go back to my one, I've got this extra field, content type application. So it looks like I don't need that. I want to delete that out. And how do I know I don't need it? Well, this HTTP node that's coming via curl is not using it. So it looks like I don't need it. So you don't even need to really understand what you're doing. If you can find this curl set of data inside the API docs, let's go and grab it. Let's go and copy it and import it as curl. Then you can make some tweaks. Now we know here we've got we don't want to go through all this again. So I'm going to delete this out because I've just created this credential type called header auth, called, what do we call it? Perp type. There we go. I don't need anything there. And there I have a complete working HTTP node, pre-configured. Don't have to be too smart. Don't have to understand API keys and all, you don't have to get deep into it. It's here, it's rating, it's ready to happen. So there's a nice little trick that I use all the time to kind of cut through all the techie stuff and just get something up and going. All right, let's take this down. Let's move on. Okay, so that's super useful. Now you can use this to access any API key, as I've said, any API key. Now sometimes APIs are a little bit tricky to work with. They've got OAuth 2 and some strange commands, etc., etc. Beyond the scope of this video to dive into the intricacies of particular APIs, but we'll be doing videos on them. For example, you may have seen we love API Apify on this channel, and you'll have seen us use the HTTP node with Apify and done some work there as well. So there's a little bit of fine tuning for each API, but essentially it's more or less the same as we've just been through. Another useful tool that I use HTTP for is to scrape websites. Now there are pre-built scraping services out there like Apify that I've just mentioned, but you don't need to use a service like that. You can just use your HTTP node. So let's go and build a scraper. So let's grab that node, put it on, line it up here in our little workspace. Okay, and we are going to go to one of my websites. In fact, let's go to Let's Automate It. .biz. All right, Let's Automate It.biz is the website. And I just want to get all the information that's on that site. So I'm just kind of using the get button. Let's see what happens. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Let's test step. It's going invalid URL. Maybe I've got to put the HTTPS. Let's put that on the front and Let's Automate It.biz. I hope I've spelled it right. Let's go and click on that. So it's going to visit the website. It's doing exactly what your web browser does. Your web browser, your Arc browser, your Chrome browser, your whatever it is that you use, your Firefox. What it is basically an HTTP request, and it heads over. Let's go and actually do that. So I'm going to grab our address. Let me actually pump this into my browser. I'm going to head over to our website, which is due for an overhaul. And there's our website. So what's happening here? This is just an HTTP request. I'm not sure what's going on with my image here. I need to check on that. And what's happening is the browser is reading all this information, all this kind of crazy code and forward slashes and dots and curly brackets. Your browser's reading that information and interpreting it and kind of returning a website, giving us images and layouts and so on. So that's what's happening here. The HTTP node's doing exactly the same thing, except it's not giving us back a pretty website. It's giving us kind of the raw code, if you will. Okay, so essentially we have just scraped the website. Very useful. But it's not overly useful because it's not really readable to us. We can't work with that. So let's just take this a little further. So essentially that's using the HTTP node right there. Job done. But let's not finish there. So there's a very cool little node in here. I think it's called extract. Here we go, work with HTML, and we are going to extract HTML content. Okay, so that's connects it up there. We are going to, source data is, JSON should do the trick. The JSON property is data. Yep, it is data. The key we want this to put out doesn't really matter. The key is kind of what is it going to call it afterwards. Let's just call it body. CSS selector, I think that's going to be HTML. And we want to return the text. So we have this readable. So let's test this, see what this does. All right. Okay, so a lot more readable. It's still got these \n's, which are basically space, but we've got something a lot more readable coming in there. But I think we can do better. So we're connecting this together. But remember, this is starting from the HTTP node. So if you want to scrape a website, go and use a service like Apify, because there are a lot of kind of JavaScripts and, fancy websites that are difficult to scrape. But if you've got a simple website, often just your HTTP node will do the job. Okay, but let's go and use a Markdown node. Convert data HTML to Markdown. The HTML is in here as the body. Okay, so what this is doing, this is just going to strip this down a little bit further, make it more readable, right? So the HTML is in this body, and I want to take it to Markdown. So let's just test step and see what we get out of here. So there we have data. It cleans it up a little bit. We kind of got some of the bits and pieces missing. We, a couple of those backspaces N have disappeared. So it just cleans it up a little bit, and it's just a little bit easier to read. Now, this is going to be super useful. You could now feed this to an AI to ask it to summarize the website. This is useful information, but it started with this HTTP node. We were able to extract content, and we were able to remove most of the HTML, if not all the HTML, and give ourselves some structured data here, which is the full website, which we can now feed to a large language model. We could feed it to a set node. In fact, why don't we go and do that? Let's go and put a set node on here, and let's just go, let's grab this. Which one's one we want to grab in here? This one, we want to just grab this data node in here, and we can just go, say scraped data and test setup. All right, and here we have a scraped version of the website. Perfect now to be sending into a large language model to do some further processing. So we've just built a web scraper right there. Super useful, lots of use cases, again, starting with this HTTP node. So there you go, make it work. Okay, there's lots of uses, by the way, for the HTTP node. These are the three of my favorites that I use all the time, especially this access any API. I use that often. But another useful one is we can actually now send data onto a webhook. So let's use this workflow we've got on the screen here now, where we've scraped a website and we've ended up with our data. So let's just call this website scraped website. Okay, so we just name that node website data. There it is. But now let's say we want to pass this on to another service. Now we could use an HTTP node to inject this. So we could use an HTTP node, and we could go and probably post this, and we could post the body, which would be, maybe let's just call this site data, and grab that in here, and it would post this data to a destination of our choosing, and maybe we have some passwords. So, the use case here is maybe, we're scraping a website, and then we want to kind of update that website in a CRM. And if the CRM didn't have a native node, we could have the API docs for the CRM in here, and we could maybe pass this scraped information, or maybe we send it through an AI first, and we get a summary of the website, and we inject the summary of the website into the CRM. So when we look up that particular client, we can see a summary of what their business is all about. That'd be a use case. But another nice one I like to do as well is we can actually send this to a webhook. Now, in n8n webhooks, we work with them all the time. They're great ways to capture data and trigger a workflow. So why don't we could, I think it's called execute. execute a sub workflow, we could use this tool here where we could execute a sub workflow and we could go get the workflow ID, etc., etc. But another way to do it that's actually simpler is we could have another workflow that's just a webhook, and we could use the HTTP node to send this information to that workflow via a webhook. Okay. But to make this simpler, because I don't want to be having multiple flows on the screen, I'm going to try and just grab a webhook from the web. So let me just do a search here for, I think there's a webhook, webhook site. I've searched for it before. So what am I doing? I'm just getting a webhook address. This is the, so how do I get a new one here? Let's just go back to take this out. Okay. It's defaulting to, I click new, create new, let's click create, see what that happens. Okay. All right. So I'd obviously been testing a little bit before I did this video. So here we have a unique webhook URL. Now you could use n8n to generate a webhook, just drag a webhook on and go and grab that webhook address. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But just for the sake of this video, I want to send the information outside of n8n. So I've just copied this unique URL. That's a webhook address. Okay. So I've come back to my HTTP node and I'm going to put in my URL. This is where I want to send this information to. I want to send it over to this address. Now, if you wanted to send it to another workflow, as I say, you could use the workflow node, or you could just grab a webhook node. Here's the webhook address. And just that would probably be a post method, and you would just copy this URL and come and pop that URL into this node. I've done exactly the same thing. I'm just using an external site. So and you could send any information you want. In this example, we've only got one data point, scrape data. If you maybe push this through a large language model, you could break this down into JSON data and pull out the links and a summary and a target audience or whatever it is you could extract from here using an LLM and produce structured data. For the sake of this, we're just going to have this one big bunch of data, this whole website. So let's go and test setup, see if this works. So it's busy sending it, and I've got a response. Let's go back over to our webhook site, and there we go. We caught the webhook. It's passed the information over. Now, if this was an n8n webhook catching this, we could use this information to trigger a new workflow and continue working. So that's the magical HTTP node. I absolutely love this node. Lets me access any API. It is, I wouldn't say it's super simple, but it's not hard if you pay attention to the documentation. It is decent documentation for the service you're wanting to access via API. HTTP node's going to let you do it. You now know how to kind of create credentials. You know the little curl hack, so you can get things in there. We know how to scrape a website, which is amazing. And you can now send data as well using a webhook. So a super useful little tool. Don't be stumped if there isn't a native workflow. So when I look at competitor tools out there and they brag about how many integrations they got, I really don't pay it much mind, because I know with n8n, I can make an integration, a connection with any tool under the sun as long as it's got an API. I hope you found this useful. Check us out in the community. Let's Automate a community. Come and join us there. We'll be unpacking this in more depth. And if you get stuck, we can help you out in the community. Come join us in there. Details in the description. Like, subscribe, smash the bell. Wow, I can't believe I said that. I sound like every other YouTuber. See you on the next video. Have fun. Good morning, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for spending time with me. We'll catch you next week. Cheers.